Born on June 17, 1865, in a teepee made of hide, on the last buffalo hunt of the Omaha tribe. Her name was Susan LaFlesche, Native American, woman, doctor, champion of her people, unsung hero. The name LaFlesche came from her grandfather, which means the arrow. But Susan was never given a tribal name because her father wanted her to be able to survive in the society she was growing up in. Susan was, in a word, remarkable, accomplishing feats that no other female or male Native American had ever done before.
What is the first word that comes to mind when you think of Susan?
The best word. She is a warrior for her people. She wanted what's best for her people, and she was not afraid to go after it.
Susan first decided she wanted to be a doctor at the age of only 8 years old, when she watched an elderly Native American woman die because a white doctor would not tend to the care she desperately needed. Her father, Joseph LaFlesche, went to Washington, D.C., and came back announcing that there will be a flood coming soon, and to prepare for it, meaning the white people were coming soon. He made Susan learn all the traditions of her people so they would not be forgotten. However, Joseph LaFlesche also made sure his children were educated in the American white society so they would be able to survive.
Joseph had a vision, and he believed in order for his daughters to participate in the changing life around them, they would have to adopt some of the white customs. He forbid them to speak Omaha in his own home. He only allowed them to speak English because he knew they would have to speak fluent English in order to get the education he wanted them to get.
1879. At the age of 14, Susan went to a school for young ladies in New Jersey with her older sister Marguerite LaFlesche. Shortly after Susan returned from New Jersey, at the age of 17, she went on to the Hampton Institute in Virginia, learning alongside the children of former slaves. Here, Susan met a handsome young man and fell in love. But Susan did not want to be like other women of her time and quit her studies, so the relationship didn't last long. In 1886, she went to the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania, nearly 1,300 miles away from her home on the Nebraska plains, to get her medical degree. Susan LaFlesche was the first person to receive federal aid to help her on her journey. While Susan was in medical school, she wrote letters home because she was extremely homesick. One of the required classes was anatomy, where the students would perform procedures on cadavers.
So Joseph LaFlesche, the chief of the Omaha tribe, the beloved father of his 4 girls and his son, forbid Susan to take this anatomy class. And she decided, after much angst, to disobey her father and take the anatomy class so she can become a doctor.
Later, on March 14, 1889, at the age of 24, Susan graduated from medical school. She was the valedictorian of her class. Born from the Nebraska soil, Susan LaFlesche was the first male or female Native American to become a doctor.
For her to take a step into the white world and then go back to serve her community is just really, really remarkable.
Every morning, she would hook her buggy to her 2 trusty horses, Pam and Pug, and start her day steering her way to her patients. In her diary, Susan states, "My hours are any and all hours of the night." Dr. LaFlesche's first patient was an 8-year-old boy. On her way home, she began to wonder if she carried out the proper treatment she had been taught. It's one thing to learn the techniques in school. It's another thing to carry them out on a real human being. But when she saw the young boy playing in the river the next day, she knew she had done the right thing, and her confidence in her abilities were secured. Most nights, Susan would go to bed supperless and was scared of dying alone in the cold, dark, and open prairie until she met Henry Picotte. They got married in 1894 and they moved to Bancroft, Nebraska. They had 2 boys, Carl and Pierre. However, Henry developed a severe drinking problem. When Susan would go see a patient, she would put her husband in a little jail cell she constructed so he wouldn't hurt himself or others when the alcohol took over. Unfortunately, 11 years after their marriage, Henry Picotte died of tuberculosis in 1905. Susan had to raise the boys by herself and refused to slow down her services as a doctor. When Susan would help her sons, she felt more like a mother, but less like a doctor. And when she helped her patients, she felt more like a doctor, but less of a mother. Nevertheless, she went on, helping her people. Dr. Susan taught Sunday school class out of her living room, where above the fireplace words read, "East, West, home is best," and continually pushed for equal opportunities for her people. Susan worked for the Office of Indian Affairs, helping not only her tribe, but the Winnebago tribe. She took on the roles of being a lawyer and an accountant in order for Native peoples to not be taken advantage of. Dr. Flesche led a group of individuals to Washington, D.C. to ban the use of alcohol on the reservation because she knew the devastating impact it had on Native peoples. She also wanted to ban the communal cup. At this time, everyone in the community was using the same cup to drink out of. This was not sanitary and was the main cause of tuberculosis. Susan Flesche worked tirelessly to protect her people from disease.
Marvelous thing for her to become that first physician, the first Native American physician. But to me, that's not her greatest accomplishment. To me, her greatest accomplishment was being a servant for her people for many, many years.
In 1907, her house that she designed was finally complete. Susan wanted to find a purpose in life and fulfill her dream of helping her people in a rapidly changing society, and that is exactly what she did. After her husband's death, she opened a private practice in Bancroft, Nebraska, before she built her hospital in Walt Hill. In her private practice, Dr. Susan was tending to Native Americans and also caring for her ill mother, who died in 1909. Dr. Susan had a meeting with 3 Nebraska state representatives and 60 Omaha tribal members about the Gallagher Bill, which stated that it intended to protect Native American children's inheritance, which was being unethically stolen from them. Dr. Flesche had always wanted a hospital of her own. The hospital was built entirely on donations that Dr. Susan secured. Not a single government dollar was used to build the hospital. In January of 1913, the hospital was completed and ready for patients. The hospital had hammocks outside because Dr. Susan believed that nature was the true healer. Every day, for part of the day, she would make her patients go outside and sit in the hammocks. The hospital served 448 people, and 126 of them were Native Americans. This hospital still sits in Walt Hill, Nebraska, and is currently being renovated so it can continue to help both Native Americans and the white community living in the area. A mental health facility is being added to help combat suicide rates among young natives, and also a community space is being added to help weave the Native people and their white neighbors together. Even today, her legacy of helping those in need continues. A true hero to her community. For 3 years, Dr. Flesche battled bone cancer in her head and neck, which made her body ache. Sadly, at the age of only 50 years old, Susan Flesche Picotte passed away on September 18, 1915, due to chronic health issues. All of the days and nights on the cold, open prairie, riding through rain and snow, had finally caught up to her. After Susan's death, her older sister, Marguerite, took care of her 2 boys. Shortly after, her 2 boys, Pierre and Carl, joined the army. Dr. LaFleche's hospital was very successful. She served many of her people and others who were sick and needed her help. You could say that she built a bridge between two worlds, just like her father intended to do. You could even say she rose to the challenge of her people. She lived by her father's quote, "Do you always want to be simply called those Indians, or do you want to go to school and be somebody in the world?" Susan LaFleche Picotte proved she could be a proud Indian and could be somebody in this world. Susan LaFleche Picotte, a true unsung hero.